Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Learning with Belvista Studios. It's a place where I get to be curious and speak to people that I am inspired by or are intriguing me in some way. So today I have someone who is that, Sonia. And she's writing a book on AI, and I know that it's very timely at the moment. We're creating a lot of courses for organizations. So I'm here to be curious about what it is that you're writing the book on and how AI and workplaces and people can work together and what are you finding and whatever you're up to, I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you questions on that. So thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
yeah, I'm happy. I always am like I ask people that I'm actually genuinely curious about, so like I do appreciate you being
Thank
here.
you.
Um, what is the problem that you solve for your people?
Sure. First off, I should probably say the book isn't really about AI,
Okay.
but it's set within the context of AI. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. So I think the problem that I solve is often kind of exacerbated by AI. I would say it's not being caused by it. But essentially, what I've done for about 20 years is helping people to work better together. So my discipline is collaboration design,
Okay.
which no one has heard of, including my parents, my friends, like most people that I know. I myself fell into it and just absolutely fell in love with it, and that's
Hmm.
where I've built a career. And it's really this discipline that says that people don't just you can't just throw a group of people together and say create amazing things. It might happen 1% of the
Okay.
time, but what you can do is really intentionally design the conditions for what Keith Sawyer calls group genius to emerge. And so this idea of group genius is creating something that's bigger than the sum of its parts. Like
Okay.
you have all these kind of clever, smart people in a room, but you can create something that's actually bigger and better than that through having the right conditions for them to work together.
Okay.
And so that's been my day job for longer than I care to admit, because that really carbon dates me. First, I think what we were talking about before we started recording, the problem that I now am really kind of obsessed slash passionate about solving is one that really came to me because it was actually my problem. So I left corporate. I was really excited by the autonomy and freedom of running my own business. And I was really shocked by how lonely and isolated I felt. Kind of all of the support structures gone, all of the little kind of moments of serendipity and connection that you would have going into an office, like kind of engaging with people. And so over the following sort of 18 months, I started exploring what could it look like if I essentially took this discipline of collaboration design and applied it to myself, not in a corporate context, not in getting a
Mm,
group of humans to work together, but how can I design that into my own life?
yeah.
And so that's my side, you can't call it a hustle because it doesn't make money, side passion project. I've been
Yeah.
researching that for about 18 months, as you said, working on this book, which is really how can we come together in collectives? How can we work together better outside of maybe the traditional institutions like government departments or businesses?
Yeah. That's cool. How have you applied it to your life? Collaboration design.
So the interesting thing about collaboration design, we normally think about it in terms of three dimensions: people, place, process.
Okay.
I would add another one, purpose, which I know is something that you're very passionate about. But when we think about those three dimensions, looking at kind of the specific problem that you're trying to solve. So, for example, with people, I knew the problem I was solving is I'd had this big wraparound institution removed from me. So I thought, okay, what are the dimensions of people that I actually need?
Hmm.
It sounds a lot more structured than it really was. But it kind of like somewhat went along with that. And I said, okay, I need the creative collaborators. So I need people in my discipline that I can work with on projects that I trust, and can kind of build those relationships with. I need people that challenge my thinking. So I need the slight randomness of people coming in. I actually need like the human physical connection
Mm,
of people around me when I'm working sometimes, and the kind of emotional support that will come from that. And different circles of things kind of emerge. So Within my business, I started to curate a collective of trusted people that I work with to work with on projects.
Hmm.
And that has very naturally evolved over kind of the last 2.5 years. I actively sought out and created a group of, there's about 20 of us. We're all women, we're all small business owners. We have a WhatsApp group, we catch up in person. It's very organic. It's that kind of water cooler conversation where you can dip in or out.
Hmm.
Um, sometimes people have more energy for it, sometimes people have less. And then the in person, which is so important, it really depends where I am. So in Melbourne, where I live normally, I have a co-working space. In Magnetic Island, where we are now, where I live some of the time, I also have a space, but also I meet people like you. I actively look for people that I can work with, have discussions with, who will stretch my thinking. Um, and I'll just seek people out. Like if I see someone writing something that I think is really interesting, I'll often reach out for them. And likewise, I publish my own Substack. So people will often come to me because something that I've said has struck a nerve, either
Hmm.
good or bad, which is
Yeah.
great because then you kind of have the conversation. So that's really the people in my own life.
Cool.
Um, Place, I've probably semi answered already. I do think physical spaces are really important. And Esther Perel talks a lot about kind of relational intelligence and social atrophy and her concern about people really closing themselves off. So I do really actively try and get out into the world and find
Mm.
places like physical places that I can work in or create kind of good virtual environments wherever I am in the world. Like I need kind of some degree of routine. Um, and then the process is probably going to be a really big I'm trying to think about it as succinctly as I possibly can. Um, but look, when I think about process, there's a couple of things. Firstly, being really intentional about any gathering or meeting or workshop, and I think Priya Parker talks about this really beautifully in The Art of Gathering. I'm a very big fan of hers. And we talk about it a lot in collaboration design, being really clear on the scope and objectives and the kind of frame of whatever you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, and you and I have talked about that before. That's even that idea of like, why are you having a meeting?
Mm.
What's the meeting for? Being really clear about that, who needs to be there, how you're going to get people to engage. Um, when I'm working on something bigger, like I want to get people together to work on kind of a bigger idea or a bigger project, um, we use a model called Scan, Focus, Act. And the idea there is to not get into solution mode straight away and to
Mm.
not be kind of constricted by existing thinking because it's really easy to fall into that.
Hmm.
So, Scan is about lifting yourself up. How can you inject inspiration? What are you reading, consuming, listening to kind of broaden yourself? Focus is about playing with possibilities, so not jumping straight into something. And then act is bias to action. So once you have worked through it, making sure that you leave with really firm ideas of what's next.
Hmm.
Um, because I mean, we've both been in kind of, I know various environments where you can have these wonderful conversations, and that's really important, and they're really meandering, and it's great, but you also need to get into action.
Yeah.
Um, yes, I'll pause there because I feel like I've said a lot.
I love
I've
this.
been scribbling things down.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, oh, so many things for my collaboration design in my life.
Yeah,
Um, I love, okay, so you start off with this perspective helping organizations with the collaboration design. You're
yeah,
also applying it to your life, which it sounds like you're very kind of more aligned into the projects and how you want to spend your energy and what inspires and stimulates
yeah,
you and the act that you want to bring into the world, which one of the projects sounds like the book, right?
yeah.
How did that come about?
That was another thing that was really organic. Like I've always been a curious person, and one of the things I thought about when I left corporate was I want to have time to write more. And so I started a Substack to force myself to write and because I had a real fear of publishing my writing. So
Yeah.
it's kind of exposure therapy, I
Cool. Okay.
suppose. And the first iteration of it was called Mind the Gap. And it was kind of mind the gap between your personal and your professional life. It's obviously a bit of a play on being from London and the tube.
Mm.
And so at the beginning, I just made it really vague so that I could write about anything. And the things that I kept on coming to during that period, because I always think you kind of think through writing and vice versa, it kept on coming back to collectives and working in community and how you could connect more. And it started to, I guess, resonate with people who were reading it and people who were writing to me. And then I kind of organically started interviewing collectives because people were just writing to me.
Cool.
And it just became a bigger piece where I realized it felt like there was a little bit of a gap for people who were maybe on a similar path to mine. We're kind of going out individually. We know that's a bigger trend, right? Like more and more people are going to be working for themselves in the future. But we're seeking kind of community and connection to try and create some kind of roadmap to support them, essentially.
Mm.
So that is the labor of love project. And the reason that it's a book is to basically force me to structure my thinking and to
Gotcha.
create something that someone can take away. I mean, I'm a big reader, as you know, and I have such a passion for books, like for consuming them my whole life, just to be able to go into another world and kind of go into someone else's mind. So it's trying to distill all of that down
Mm.
and have the discipline to do that.
Yeah. So, okay, let's look at this collectives
Yeah.
and in an organization, right? Because I don't think we traditionally think of collectives in the organizational space. We might think of them socially
Yeah.
in subcultures or I don't know, different things,
Yeah.
hobbies, stuff like that. And if we're going into to play with what you're saying around like going into another world of a book, what might a collective look like within a corporate organization?
Yeah. It's really interesting because I actually think in corporates, there's always a lot of informal relationships and structures. There's obviously the formal hierarchy, but there's always an informal hierarchy for how you
Hmm.
get things done. And a lot of that will be collectives that are communities of practice or have shared values or are thinking about things in a different way, are kind of interested in things in a different way. So for me, it's a group where you're not bound by a formal corporate hierarchy, as in you maybe don't have the same P&L. And
Hmm.
that can exist in a business or outside of a business, but you have a shared purpose, you have a desire to work together and a willingness to share resources and ideas. And that can look like a very formal collective, actually, in some ways, or it can look quite informal.
Okay.
Artist collectives are probably the originator of this, and they're from started around the 12th century, so going
Before
back a
my
bit,
time.
yeah, only a couple of years. But it's really interesting. I actually there's a brilliant collective. There's about 8 or 9 of them, and they're all ex big pharma who have gone out on their own to fit more into, busy lives and being parents and everything else. And the woman who started this actually modeled it on an artist collective. She
Okay.
was like, I wonder if, which is how most good things start, right? I wonder if we could create something like an artist collective with the work that we do. And they have, and that's it's I think it's such an amazing example because it's one of the most regulated industries in the world. And some of them are based in America, so like even more
Yeah.
regulated. And so the way they set it up is pretty formal. You have to be interviewed to go in, you have to be aligned with their values. They have formal NDAs with each other. They meet every fortnight to talk about keeping their skills current and any challenges that they've got. They can offer peer reviews with different people within the collective. And when I hear stories like that, I get really inspired because I think it's so much broader than perhaps people might think. Because I
Hmm.
think people think about collectives as being creative. I spoke to another one that's in sub-Saharan Africa. They do a lot of kind of economic analysis and social impact modeling and that kind of thing. Um, and again, like really amazing experts in their fields
Hmm.
who want work to be a part of their life, but not their whole life. They want to do really good work on good projects, and this gives them scale.
Hmm.
Again, really kind of cohesive values and purpose, but it just provides a different way of working than just saying, oh, I have to work in a company.
Yeah. What are the conditions of a successful collective in your view?
I think that there's a few different things. There's definitely a piece around mindsets.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things that I talk about a lot is I call it mutually assured prosperity.
Okay.
Um, so the way that a lot of us have been brought up, particularly but not exclusively in the West, is that, since about the 80s, is that life is a zero-sum game, right? Like you win, I lose.
Okay.
And we're ranked against each other in your exams, at your work, you're on your bell curve,
Mm,
like all of that kind of stuff. And if you have that mindset in business where everything is competitive, um, it's really hard to form a positive collective, particularly if you actually have your kind of individual business structures. Whereas if you actually believe, no, life is a positive sum game and there's enough work for everyone, and us supporting each other will just create more work, the kind of,
mhm.
rising tide lifts all boats. That's one thing. Like I've found that in every single collective that I've spoken to, and often the people who founded them. I spoke to a legal one in the UK, for example, and we were kind of chatting, and they he would be doing much better. He would be making a lot more money not being in this model, but he's chosen it because he really wants it to be equitable and people to enjoy work and to have freedom. So it's kind of being motivated by different things. So that's one.
Mm,
Um, And another is kind of it's really embracing this idea of being a team player, which again is not something that was kind of has
mm,
been historically rewarded in corporates. Like it's very be a leader, but actually being a team player and supporting others and kind of lifting that. And the third one is if you have a really good collectives have diversity.
okay.
And we know that good collaboration has diversity. Like there's heaps of good studies showing that if you have good diversity of perspective, it gives you better ideas. So being able to sit in productive discomfort with others who may not come from the same background or think the same way is another way, because you don't have in a corporate hierarchy, you kind of can solve problems by saying, I trump you because I'm more senior, therefore I'm right and you're
Mm,
wrong. If you're looking for more a different kind of setup that's more equal, you have to have another way of solving problems and making agreements. So those aren't even those are just kind of the mindset conditions, and then um, there's lots of different kind of pieces around how you can actually set them up, like the commercial models and potential
mhm.
pitfalls and how you design them. But I really believe that if you as a person can adopt those, you're on the right path to then be finding the right people and designing it in the right way. All of those other things can come.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love it. Um, the are these the ingredients of like the collective code, which is the name of your book, you think?
The in the collective code, it's so funny. I never wanted a framework because
Okay.
I'm an ex-consultant, right? So framework makes me go like, oh, there's always a framework, which is why I call it the code
Yeah.
rather than the framework.
Better than a framework. It's a
Yeah.
code.
And it's not linear or anything like that, but when I started really talking to people, it was so interesting, like all of these different collectives, so many different industries and geographies, and the same things came up again and
Yeah.
again. So eventually I had to go like, okay, there's a bit of a framework. I accept
Okay.
that. And that framework is commit, curate, create,
Okay.
which is a bit of a tongue twister. So commit is the stuff that I just talked about, that
Yeah.
the mindset shifts. And when I say commit, it's kind of committing to that mindset that you're
Yeah.
going to work collectively those shifts. Curate is about how you go out and find the right people.
Okay.
And create is basically about how you design the work. So some
Yeah.
of that stuff that we were talking to at the beginning, what are the spaces like? How often do you work remotely versus in person? What does all of that look like? Like all of that kind of stuff.
Mm. How do you get this happening in a corporate organization? Like the commit, curate, create.
So it's really interesting. I suspect the impetus would probably need to be bottom up. Like I think you would probably have the odd leader who'd be quite enthusiastic about it. Because the great thing about it is if you have collectives like this, people are generally so passionate that there's so much discretionary effort to be unlocked.
Yeah.
Like so much. But um, I also appreciate that there are so many priorities on a leader's to-do list at the moment that it probably wouldn't be up there. In my experience, where this has worked well in corporates has been having one or two really passionate people to drive it.
Yeah.
And to be really frank, in a lot of the kind of well-sustained collectives that I talk to, there's often a lead curator um, who started it, who's the person who kind of drives it a bit more. They probably don't see themselves as the leader necessarily, and they certainly don't see themselves as anyone's boss, but they do have somewhat of a drive. And I think that's the same in corporates. Like I've seen corporates that have really amazing communities of practice around like a particular skill or a really great learning culture that's driven actually bottom up by collective. And that's generally one passionate person that's getting other people excited about it and others coming along on that journey.
Yeah. Okay. And for people that are this, maybe they're listening and they're like leading a collective, like a secret one in their organization or whatever it looks like. Wait, I lost my question. Um, no, it was something about getting it into the strategic side of it in this collaboration design to get a place at the table. It was on that theme, like these people that are doing the underground collective work where they're not in that role, but they see how to make a change. They have the followers and all of this. How
Yeah.
can they find that place to drive strategic change in their organization?
So I think realistically, which is true of, I mean, any change that you would make, you have to make it commercial, right? So if you're going to make the case for resources or visibility in an organization, you have to show some degree of commercial value. And the great thing about, I think, this movement is it really does start to pop up. It's like when Google used to do the 20%. I don't know if they still do, but they were obviously very famous for having the 20% time and leaning into that and committing to it because so many of their biggest advances got made in that 20% time.
Yeah.
And it's a similar piece. If you can see that there are some great ideas coming out of collectives in your organization, energy and resources will naturally start to go there. On another note, if you're a leader who's really committed to that, I mean, what I always say about anything, I do a lot of kind of culture work with organizations, is you have to line up your incentives and your bigger picture structures around the stuff that you think is important. And so the example that I always give is, you have organizations where you might say collaborate, and collaboration is one of your values. And most companies have work together or collaboration is one of their values. But if you then have misaligned incentives where people are actually rewarded at the end of the year and financially for the stuff that they've done individually, for stuff that their team's done by itself,
Yeah.
people respond to what they see is important. So the stuff that actually gets rewarded.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely change that. Like it's relatively simple. And I always think with any cultural change, having some kind of some symbolic shift in terms of metrics is really helpful. Like something that proactively rewards people working together across the organization, because the payoff for execs is having these kind of informal, semi-informal collective structures in an organization is a really good way to break through silos. It's a really good way to help build relationships, to cross-pollinate skills and diversity of backgrounds, and the outcomes from that can only be good.
I feel like a little bit disheartened because
Aw.
it's like that's what we've been trying to do. There's these
Yeah.
people trying to push through with like good intention, champions, blah, blah, blah. We don't always have the skills or the environment that supports these things. We're
Yeah.
measuring the wrong things, which in my head makes it harder for a collective to thrive and
Yeah.
survive. And then I think of these people that are so intrinsically motivated, and it's like, no, it's gonna die. Whether they leave the organization and the hope and all the good things leave with them, or yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Like it's
don't get
very
disheartened.
systems, like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's so much to solve, the root cause, all this. It's like a bigger thing than just go up and with your business case and maybe get shut down.
Yeah, look, ultimately, everything is systemic, right?
Mm.
My hope with this is some forward-thinking leaders take it on.
Yeah,
And what tends to happen, as you'll have seen as well in your career, is when people see the success in new ways of working,
100%.
other people want it. And that's
Yeah.
true within organizations and it's true kind of across organizations. And often, a lot of my background was implementing really big ways of working transformations at kind
Yeah.
of big corporates. And we would never go in and say, let's try and make all this big change now.
Mm.
So difficult. It's just like pushing up against a brick wall. But if you would go to the pockets where people were interested, where those leaders were interested, um, other leaders, for want of a better word, will get FOMO. So
Mm.
they'll see something new that's working that people are getting excited about, and they will naturally go to it. Like that is my belief around how you can make
Yeah.
change in those kind of businesses.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually have evidence of that personally, where we were so wanting human-centered problem-solving approaches with
Yeah.
organizations we were working with. Maybe I didn't know how to articulate it right the first time. Maybe the organization wasn't ready, so we did whatever they wanted, the normal way. But it planted seeds. And the
Yeah.
next time we worked together, or the next problem we were trying to solve, it was, hey, remember that human-centered weird thing you were talking about? Yeah, let's go talk to the people about the problem we're trying to solve now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the culture of an organization is like a personality, right? Like
Mm.
it changes really slowly, if at all. And often it's about just having those personality traits and saying, what's the good side of that rather than the dark side?
Yeah,
Kind of like if you think about personality, like, oh, someone can lean anxious, that means that they're really good at looking at details, like that
yeah.
kind of thing. You can draw out those personality traits, but actually, like big change, like change in big organizations is slow and arduous. And unfortunately, I do not have a silver bullet to that with my with my passion for collectives and
Fair.
collaboration design.
Okay, so the people that will read your book, what impact will it have on them after?
My hope and the reason that I'm writing it, because it really is, I don't know if anyone else has written a book, it really is the most kind of painful seesaw of like wild emotions and self-doubt. My hope is that people who are working for themselves and feeling lonely and disconnected,
Yeah.
or are in a job that they really hate and have a dream of leaving, but are really scared of that loneliness and isolation, will see a way through.
Okay.
Like they'll see that there's a roadmap, they'll see that there's examples of people who have done that. Um, and my hope is that it can spread a little bit of positivity and optimism about a new way, a different way of working.
And in your research, what are like some things that have surprised you?
I think, like I was saying before, the consistency of themes in a variety of contexts has really surprised me.
Hmm.
Um, because, I speak to like a creative agency collective in APAC, and then I speak to a legal collective in London. And actually, the things that come through in terms of their values and how they want to work and what the right environment for doesn't change dramatically.
Hmm.
I've also been, I don't know if surprise is the right word. People that I speak to are so warm and welcoming, and they really go out their way to speak to me. Like I'll be connected to someone in London, for example, and they'll get a call in straight away at a really awkward time. And I'll talk to them, and there's nothing in it for them. Like nothing in it for them. The people I speak to just have a real passion for propagating this model
Yeah.
and talking about it because they really, really believe in it. And it's funny, I've kind of stumbled across this like subculture that I wasn't even aware of
Yeah.
by accident. And the more people I speak to, the more excited I get about how they feel about it and what it's meant for their working lives. People who are working for 70-hour weeks for the really big law firms and
Yeah.
now have actually found a different way. People who are scientists for big pharmaceutical companies and now they can take their kids to school, but they have really great connections with the people that they're working with. Yeah, that's been the
That's
pleasant
crazy.
surprise.
How has that happened? I feel like people will want the answer to that. To go from a 70-hour work week using this. Like,
Yeah. Um, it's not about the hours exactly. It's more that in some of these big corporates, the way it's set up is that there are expectations about the hours you work, the number, the amount of time that you're at your
mhm,
desk, your utilization targets, if you're in
mhm,
professional services. And the thing about collectives is you can design that for yourself. Like you can start from scratch. And you and I were talking before I joined about Company of One. I love that book. I love what Paul Jarvis talks about. And his big thing is against growth for growth's sake, which I really subscribe to. I was
mhm.
very inspired by the book when I was setting up Clever Manker. And so he says, start from the beginning of what do you want your life to look like?
Yeah.
And therefore, what does the working life look like? What do you need to earn? And then work backwards from that rather than going, oh, we have to scale, because scale often, okay, say you scale, so you hire more people, so you have more processes, so you have more admin, so you have a higher cost base, so you then need to win more work. Like it's not necessarily good. You can be less
Mm,
nimble because you've got
yeah.
more people. It's that kind of idea. And when I'm thinking about collectives, it's really that, but a step on. So thinking about that for yourself, but how can you then come together with people
Yeah.
in an intentional way where you have a shared purpose, where you've got trusted people to collaborate with, and you have community, but you still have the autonomy and purpose and the lifestyle that you want.
Yeah. That's cool. It sounds like the application is to go kind of scan, focus, act as like a mini framework on yourself
Yeah.
in your life. And then when you bring it to whether you leave a job, whether you just redefine what your role or your relationship with your workplace is and your role at the workplace, that you're kind of role modeling these behaviors, you're setting up behaviors, you're setting up expectations in an exchange of what you're putting out and what people are willing or seeing with you, which then gives them a benchmark to measure and scan, focus, act on their life. And in that way, we kind of build our tribes. We can see a respect in, that person is not responding to my text message, my phone call after hours. Maybe I'll think about that for
Mm.
myself, to a point of like, yeah, the bigger impact in a bigger way in the organization where it might be more of a collective, but it's like an informal way of being that is kind of almost coming back down to the authenticity or the groundedness of the individual,
Mm.
which gives that to happen for another person, and then it happens for another person, and then we're all kind of like authentically aligned to ourselves, which moves us into the right spaces, places, purpose as an individual, as a collective, as an organization, as a world. Internally.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've never thought about that model as being used on an individual, but the basic principle of it, which is the same as human-centered design, right, is
Yeah.
rather than is to diverge before you
Yeah.
converge.
Yeah.
So you absolutely can do that as an individual in terms of just thinking about options, drawing in more inspiration, kind of considering it, and then going back into possibilities. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of different design frameworks around that, but I think there's something really interesting about taking the time to think more expansively about possibility and challenge some of the assumptions that you might have about your work and your career and your life. And that's something that I really encourage people to do, even separately from the whole idea of collectives, because also it's obviously not for everyone.
Mm.
Some people might think completely differently. Some people might love the structure of a company. They might really want that security, although I would argue you don't really get security working at
Nothing
a
is secure.
corporate.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not saying that this is for everyone, but it's just saying, well, think about another way to put this. We think about the company and the job and the 9 to 5 work week and Monday to Friday as something that has always existed and is inevitable. But it's only as old as the Industrial Revolution, right? It's a couple of
Mhm.
100 years old. It's like really not that old at all. And the 9 to 5 only came about because of, the labor movement insisting on people not being like working 20-hour days. And because if you did an 8-hour shift, you can get 3 shifts into a factory.
Okay.
So there's nothing about that
Mm,
traditional framing of a week that actually makes sense for knowledge work today, but it's just what we assume we should be doing. And there's a science fiction writer, Ursula K. Le Guin, who I love. I always think science fiction's great for, they probably have like the sharpest observations on just
wow.
life and
Okay.
existence. I'm going to butcher the quote, but she said something like, we assume that, like we thought the divine right of kings was something that couldn't be challenged.
Okay.
And that's how we feel about capitalism now, and how we feel about, I'm not arguing for obviously the decline of capitalism, but that's how we feel about the way things are now in lots of different aspects of our lives. And it's not necessarily true. Prior to companies, most people worked in guilds. So
Okay.
you were basically an independent worker,
Yeah.
and you would start as an apprentice and you would achieve mastery in your craft, and you would be in this guild, in this community that was very embedded in local society. Um, but you would work independently. And back then, things like building cathedrals was like the most important work that you could do. It was the equivalent of
Wow.
being, the partners in the big firms or the heads of the banks or that kind of thing now, because they were the really prestigious things that
Okay.
you would have in a town, and they would take decades and decades. And so it's like that way of working. I mean, that wasn't that long ago.
Mm,
And that was what was really desirable and how people operated. So I think I would just encourage people to think about the fact that the things you assume will always be there may not always be there.
yeah. Okay, so if we're talking about collectives and something that was never there, which is AI, and now it's like integrated into our
Yeah.
lives, any linkage or perspectives to share?
AI is really interesting because obviously everyone's got a hot take, and I don't think anyone really knows what, and certainly I don't, what the unforeseen consequences will be at this stage, because there's so many moving parts. And with any technology, we can't really predict it.
Hmm.
When the printing press was invented, you didn't go, in 200 years, the Reformation will happen.
Mm,
But you can draw a direct line from that. And I do think AI is like electricity in the sense that it's a technology that will change things so much we can't possibly foresee it at this stage, in the same way that you couldn't possibly foresee all of the changes that were going to happen, the advent of the motor car, like all of those kind of things. I studied history, if that's not
you're like
if
so
that's not
many,
obvious.
you're like a library. I feel like I'm talking to an encyclopedia. I'm like, which one am I going to open? What letter? What story is going to come out?
I'm just a weird person who
Not
thinks
so,
about things
but
in a strange
you're
way.
intelligent and knowledgeable.
Um, yeah, so I can't remember what the original question was there.
So we're talking about collectives, and now maybe they're going to be interrupted, integrated
AI,
with
yes.
AI.
So a couple of thoughts on that. One thing about AI is it does, I think somewhere it can be really useful for like companies of one, like
Okay.
my own, is for almost replacing like admin tasks, things that you might otherwise need
Hmm.
kind of more external help for. So it might be that you can use AI to help corral a collective where it needs kind of extra support, extra
Hmm.
resources almost that you can have as effectively for free. Um, but if anything, my really strong belief is that, which is, backed up by the World Economic Forum, and when they look at the skills that they believe will be really important in the next 10 to 20 years, they talk about things like critical thinking and problem solving and creativity and collaboration.
Hmm.
So, in other words, really human skills, the things that cannot be automated. Because if you think about something technical, doing something like faster, AI can do it faster. Like doing it more efficiently, AI can do it more efficiently. Forget about it.
Mm,
The only way that we can really out kind of pace AI, not pace is the wrong word, but outperform, is to lean into the really human things that we do. And to be able to come together as a collective, as a group of humans with a diverse set of skills and experiences, and to put them together in interesting ways and do interesting work together that solves problems, um, that I think is AI proof.
Mm.
So if anything, it's not, yes, use AI, absolutely, and it'll be so useful for processes and all sorts of things
Mm.
that we can't even imagine. But no, I think if anything, the rise of the collective is a reaction to that.
Oh, it sounds like so revolutionary what you're like. We'll just leave it at that. No.
Time will
Um,
tell if I'm right or not.
yeah, true. We'll find out. I'm gonna pause now on this. But I feel like for the people watching and listening, that you are someone that they should reach out to and they should consider you like they would an AI tool, like for this collaboration design, for this looking at collectives. I think with your experience and the research and your personal passion, you have the hows, you're able to connect the dots for people, and you can shortcut things very easily from, yeah, like even the books or the science fiction, you're making all these links. You're such a valuable resource for people that are in corporate, doing career change, have billion-dollar problems to solve, down to like very small little problems. So I see you as like this very valuable human being that people
Oh,
should connect
thank
to.
you.
Yeah, like I've written down so many things, but even just these little frameworks, but your experience is like you're able to curate solutions very easy. And I know in other conversations that we've had this framework around what you actually do for your customers and your clients, like you get results and you work, so you can just trust that. Oh yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much. I
for
really enjoyed
sharing.
the conversation.
We will put all the notes and like links and stuff in the description of the video. And you should definitely check that out and connect with Sonia on LinkedIn and follow her Substack, and maybe request some things that she should be sharing more into the world, because I think it's a
Yes.
really nice perspective that we can learn from and will add value. So thanks for listening always. See you in the next episode.
Thank you.